look, the tax take downgraded, and so the relative optimism around how much tax money was going to come in this financial year has been muted by the reality of an undershoot on fuel levy collections, under collection in VAT revenue, and lower personal income tax. All of that offset a bit by higher collection on corporate income tax, more money from dividend taxes, and just under 2.5 billion rand more from other taxes. But that is a revenue shortfall of 22 billion rand for the current year. The SARS Commissioner, Edward Kieswetter, joins us now. Edward, very good morning. Thank you for making some time in what I'm sure is an extremely busy morning.
Good morning. It's like every other morning.
Yes, I was going to say, probably every morning is busy. The 13.4 billion undershoot on fuel levy collections, that has a lot to do with less diesel being bought, which has a lot to do with generators not needing diesel because the lights are on. So, I mean, in a way, even though it's negative in revenue terms, it's a positive in sort of broader country terms.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you've nailed it. It's a good news, bad news story. Because Eskom, we will remember last year, had to burn these expensive open cycle gas turbines to supplement the poor performance of the coal-fired. Now the coal-fired power stations are more available, but also there's been a replacement of rooftop solar, and households and factories who used to burn diesel for additional generation now have switched also to the renewable. So on the whole, three things will drive up the price, the levy. The first is the rate, and we know the minister has kept the rate constant. The second is the volume, and there's been 11 percentage points decline in volume, over 1.3 million fewer litres of fuel. And the third is price, and we know price has largely stayed the same, and that has caused the downward effect on fuel levies. The other two big ones are equally important, and as I normally say, that what happens in the tax take is a direct reflection of what's happened in the economy. Now, at the time of the budget, the assumption was that the wage bill would grow by 8.4%. Whereas actually the growth in the wage bill is closer to 5%. And that has meant a 12 billion fewer collection, and that's purely a reflection of a wage bill that isn't growing as fast as we assumed. And then you also mentioned VAT, import VAT, not domestic VAT. I must just differentiate. And that's a direct reflection. At the time of the budget, the assumption was that imports would grow by 1.9%, whereas the actual reality is that imports have declined by 3.7%. And in that regard, we had a shortfall of almost 16 billion just from import VAT and customs duties.
Okay, and look, I mean, if the infrastructure spend program gets going, then a lot of probably quite expensive machinery will have to be imported as part of building that infrastructure, and that's potentially a positive for revenue down the line.
There's a few positives. You've mentioned the one. And of course, there it's going from plan to execution, and that's always our challenge. So one would hope that the infrastructure-led... What is really different this time is there's a lot more openness in terms of government approach to crowd in private sector funding. As we've seen how our problems were resolved in the energy sector when the regulations were lifted and private investors, companies could erect their own alternative energy sources. We also see the same readiness in the logistics and transport sector, and just generally government is more open to public-private partnerships and crowding in funding, which also means that some of that pressure is relieved from the fiscus, and that generally is good for an infrastructure-led growth strategy. The other positive in the short term is that we see, as of this morning, over 1.7 million directives have been issued on the two-pot retirement system. That has two aspects. The first is almost 30 billion of funds will be withdrawn by members of these pension funds. That will hopefully have a positive effect on consumption, which will have good for the economy, good for taxes, and the direct tax that will be retained from that at this stage stands at about 7.3 billion. So also another positive sign. And then we've seen...
just on that, is the feeling that the rate of directives being issued is slowing down, that most people who are going to access the system now that it's in operation, that the majority of those people have done that decision, they've done the admin? Or do you expect the same kind of flow of directives to continue through until the end of the financial year?
Well, we think that the 1.7 represents... the assumption was that between 5 and 6 million people will probably withdraw their funds. So if that's true, then we can expect that the 1.7 will grow quite a bit. I believe that closer to December, when people may feel some of their cash straps, what is the reality, and we see it here, but we also see it with struggling of our debt recovery program in SARS. The consumers are really struggling. There's a feeling that people aren't disputing the debt that they have with SARS, but we have found a significant increase in people asking us to defer their debt, to enter into debt repayment arrangements. So there is a sense that people are struggling, and I think the two-pot withdrawal will go a long way to relieving some short-term financial pressures. Obviously, it has longer-term consequences. So we think that towards the end of the year, we may very well see a number significantly higher than the 1.7 that we've already seen to date.
And you were about to add another positive in terms of anticipation, expectation outlook.
Yes, so we have seen, particularly in non-LBI, we have the large listed companies in our large business division. Outside of that, we have medium and smaller companies. We've seen an increase in provisional taxes, which caught us by surprise. And that augurs well for the second half of the year if that continues, because your first provisional payment by companies is generally an indication of their sense of their full year profitability. So that's positive. And then, as I said, we think that domestic VAT will continue to remain positive because of the additional bubbles in the economy as a result of the two-pot withdrawal, as a result of inflation trending down, and hopefully interest rates maintaining its current course, will all make a bit more of disposable income available. There's also NAMSA is reporting a positive impact on motor vehicle sales, and motor vehicle sales is generally a lead indicator for positive sentiment and consumer upward trends. So I think the second half of the year, we expect a better second half of the year than the first half, but the minister at this stage has introduced the downward revision of some 22 billion rand because we don't believe that the positive will completely offset the negative in the first half.
Thank you very, very much. On to the next part of a traditionally busy day for the SARS Commissioner, Edward Kieswetter.